Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. They're going to send a little extra soap, travel size, soap bars and laundry soap, cleaning soap flakes. I've been using that stuff all day long today. Great stuff. Order today at puresoapflakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild. The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Okay, this is one of those shows that I'm really going to enjoy, okay? It's a show I've been looking forward to. I'm flipping the channel on C-SPAN the other night, and I see this woman, beautiful woman, Marcia Zugg. She's up on C-SPAN. Who's presenting this book, Buying a Bride, an engaging history of mail order matches. And it's all about the history of mail order brides, of going way back to Jamestown. I almost said Jonestown. Jamestown, Virginia. Not at Jonestown. Who knows what they were doing over there? But in Jamestown, Virginia, this goes back to. So, Marcia Zugg, are you there?
I am. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Tell us about yourself first. Who is Marcia Zugg?
Well, I'm a professor of law at the University of South Carolina, and my research focuses on family law and immigration law.
Okay, great. Oh, boy, I could have you back because I was looking for an immigration spokesperson about this Trump, all that stuff. My God.
Oh, well, there's a lot. There's a lot going on in immigration law these days.
It's amazing. Okay, now, law professor. And what about you? You married, single?
I'm married. I have 2 little girls.
Married with 2 little girls. Okay, and do you met your husband the normal way?
Yes, I'm not a mail-order bride.
No, but I was looking, too, at the description on Amazon for the book that there's now mail-order husbands, so who knows? Now, this is a fascinating topic, and I would guess, if I had to guess, I'd say that you were watching that TV show, 90 Day Fiancé, and this is what caught your attention? No?
Well, that show really interests me, but I was already well into the book before that came out. But I actually like it because it gives people a better sense of the sort of people who are interested in doing this. It gives them real people, real stories, because there's such a mythology around mail-order brides and the type of the type of men who are interested in getting married that way.
That's so true. I watch that show too, 90 Day Fiancé, when I can catch it, because I don't follow TV shows and stuff. But it does give you a different insight to what these people are like and what their lives are like and what their motivations are. And you're right. When the typical, stereotype of a guy who goes into this, what would you call it? Like a guy with no game?
Yeah, I mean, typically the words that are thrown around are pathetic, loser, never any flattering terms about the sexist, controlling, abusive. So these are the stereotypes that are out there about the men who seek mail-order marriage. So from unflattering to actually dangerous. And the women are typically described as desperate, abused, powerless, naive, exploited. So I came into this with those stereotypes in mind and really thinking, well, a couple of different things. I believe that was the way modern mail-order marriage was, but there's another image in America of mail-order brides, and it's these historical mail-order brides. So I was a big fan of books like Little House on the Prairie, the pioneer women who went out west, and there are a lot of mail-order brides of the Old West, and the image we have of them is very different, right? We view them as really these heroes who help settle the West, who help fulfill the manifest destiny of, sea to shining sea. So I wanted to know, what happened? How can we have these 2 different ideas of mail-order brides? One of them must be wrong. And I came into it assuming that the historic conception of mail-order brides was just looking at things through those rose-tinted glasses, that historically the women were also abused and exploited, and we just are remembering it wrong. And what I actually found as I was writing the book was that it was the opposite, that the benefits of mail-order marriage continue today, and it is, for various reasons that we'll talk about, the image changed to this negative image, despite the fact that modern mail-order brides have very similar motivations and benefits from the marriage, and for men too, as they always have.
But one of the things you were saying on C-SPAN is that the women in these cases had a lot more power than we realized.
Oh, definitely. Because one of the things that happens is the sort of women who become mail-order brides are obviously not women who are 100% contented where they are. And one of the things that can make women not content is when they're not treated well. So a lot of times the women would leave bad situations, and the reason why their situations were bad could vary, but they would go historically out west or even further back. They would go to the original colonies, and they would do so to increase their value, both their marriageability value, but also just their value as women in society. Now
back at the original colonies, where were these women coming from?
They were coming, well, the ones who came to Jamestown, they were coming from England, but Canada had a very similar program. So they were coming from France up in French Canada, and then also the Louisiana colony was French Louisiana, so they came from France. And in Western Canada as well, slightly later in the 19th century, they came over from Britain too. So historically, the groups that came over were French and English women, and over time, the sending countries have changed. And that's part of the reason why the view of Miller marriage has changed as well.
And who came up with this idea? What, were they just sitting around and said, hey, we got no women here, let's put an ad in the paper?
Almost. I mean, so Jamestown, Virginia was not really a great place to be in the early 17th century. And originally women came over with the men, and everyone is just dying off. It's disease, famine, Indian raids, and the first group of women and men most of them don't make it. Men continue to come because this is a good way for them to make their fortune. So they're willing to risk it. But the women back in England hear about Virginia. One of the common descriptions that I come across is they describe it as a misery, a hell, a death. So, with advertising like that, most of these English women are like, no, I don't think so. So now we have a problem. You have the desire to start a flourishing colony. And you send over men, but without women, these men aren't interested in staying. They're coming over, they're planting their tobacco, they're going to get their money for it, and then they all plan on going back to England with their money and setting up shop there, which is fine for them, but not really good for the long-term prospects of the colony. So that's what most of the men are doing. Some of the other men don't even wait that long. They look around this colony, they say, this is a horrible place to be, but hey, that Indian village over there, they're not starving, and they have women. So many of the men also abandon the colony to go live in the Indian villages. They marry Indian women. And this is also a problem for the whole justification for colonization, because part of the reason that Europeans say that they have the right to colonize North America, which is not empty, is that they are superior, right? They have a superior religion, they have a superior culture. But that's hard to justify when all of your colonists decide that, hey, you're not so superior. Actually, the native inhabitants look like they're doing much better, and I'd like to leave to go over there. Thank you. So this is a big problem, and the leaders of the Virginia colony decide they need to fix it. And they realize that the way to fix it is to bring over women. So basically, they are sitting around trying to figure out what to do about this. They hit on the idea, okay, we'll bring over women, which is all fine and good, but you have to convince the women to come over. And the way they have two options. They could force women to come over, which does happen in various places at various times, but the leaders of the Virginia colony don't want to do that. They're looking for women who are actually going to be committed to the colonization plan and committed to Jamestown. And if you're forcing women to go against their will, they're not going to be committed. They're going to do the same thing. They're going to leave as soon as they can, or they're going to run away. So they need to find women who come willingly. And in order to get women to come willingly, they need to incentivize them the same way they incentivize the men. So the plan they hit on is to create, I keep using the word incentives, but create various incentives, property incentives, monetary incentives, power incentives that the women don't have back in England, such that for some women, this starts to look like a reasonable risk, that they really can change their lives for the better by going to Virginia.
Okay, the incentives, like the first thing I would think of is, well, you pay them, you offer them cash, but what were they coming up, giving them property and stuff?
Well, I mean, the equivalent of cash. So they give them dowries. One of the things that a lot of these women had to do, a lot of them were, working class women, many of whom needed to go into service for many years before they had enough money to get married. So what they're saying is, hey, you can skip that whole 10 years, scrubbing toilets or the equivalent, and here's your dowry. And not only are we giving you a dowry, but we're giving you the possibility of much increased social status because there are no women over in Jamestown, so you're going to have the pick of the men. And a lot of these men are landowners, right? That's why they went over there, so they could improve their status. So instead of being, a working-class woman in England, you have the possibility of kind of being a lady. And they're promised the first group of servants that come over. They're promised any of the guys that they want. They're freed from the 10 years of working for enough dowry to marry, someone of their social station. And they are promised land as well. They are, there are tracts of land that are set aside for the women. And they're also guaranteed power that they don't have otherwise. So, for instance, the idea is that all the women are going to pick rich men, and then these rich men will reimburse the Virginia company the cost of sending the women over to America, which is super expensive. But they also promise that, hey, if you decide that you fall in love with, a poor guy and you want to marry him, that's fine. You can do that. It's, up to you. We're going to respect your choices. And you see that happen not just in the Miller or Bride context in Virginia or, the original marriage part, but it's the culture of Virginia at this point. Because women are a scarce commodity, they have a lot more power in the marriage market. And normal rules that restrict women don't, even if they're technically on the books, they're not actually enforced during this period. So the women get money, they get improved social standing, and they get improved, political power. So it's not for everyone, but it's definitely not the act of a desperate woman. It's the act of a woman who's thinking just like the men who came out as well, that this is a way for her to make her fortune in the world.
It's fascinating, and it seems to be omitted from history that these women were given extra power and privileges. They don't want you knowing that, right? They want to keep that under wraps. How does the dowry work? Explain to me. How does that? Who comes up with the money, and where does it go to? Or the property? Well,
the dowry comes from the woman or the woman's family, and a lot of times for lower class women, it's the stuff to start a household. So a lot of it's linens and furniture and things like that you need in order to set up your own home. Upper class women, they need more money in order for the man to basically be willing to marry them. And it's basically the woman's family, to some extent, buying a husband for her. The money often, technically, part of it will remain the woman's, but as soon as she gets married during this period, they're operating under a system of coverture, which literally means covered woman. So as soon as a woman gets married, she is covered by her husband's legal identity. She can't own property. She can't sign documents herself. She doesn't exist as a separate being. You see this all the time in old cases about things like a woman can't sue her husband because she is her husband. So the woman doesn't actually get a legal identity back until the death of her husband. So this is a major hindrance for women. And to go somewhere where you don't have the same... Sometimes with Miller marriage, they were able to go to places that got rid of coverture entirely, or in the colonies where it just really isn't being enforced to the same extent, because it really was a very repressive regime for women.
Or you could call it the good old days.
I wouldn't.
I know. I want to make a lot of enemies today. The chat room's going to go nuts. Okay, but that's fascinating to me now, because back in those days, the women had to come up with a dowry to be for a man to want to marry them. But today, it's the opposite. Don't you think that women are more only willing to marry men or meet men or admire men that have money? So when did that change? It's really not the topic of the book. Yeah.
Couple different, a lot of what, that's a loaded question.
Okay.
There are a couple different things that have happened. I think one of them is that in the past, women couldn't make their own money. So their entire financial well-being was based on their husband. So if you wanted to be well-off, you better marry a well-off man. Nowadays, if you want to be well-off, you as a woman, you could make your own money. So if you want to get married, it's not because you need the man to support you, but a lot of women are not willing to have a man that they need to support. So as women have increased their, economic power, a lot of the men that they used to be willing to marry, because they were still making more than the women were, they don't seem necessarily like such a good marriage deal anymore. A lot of women would prefer to stay single than marry the men maybe that their mothers or grandmothers married. And in that sense, if women aren't as interested in marrying men who make less than them and women are making more, that can mean that men need to make more money as well to get married. And that's a big part of what you see in modern mail order marriage, that the men who are seeking mail order brides are men who have been left behind by the modern American marriage market. They have been rejected by the women who used to be their peers. So working class women tend to get more of an education than working class men. They're going to college, they're getting advanced degrees, they're moving up, and they look at these men who, blue collar workers or, lower income, and they just aren't sure that it's a good deal for them to marry them, and they're rejecting them. So in that sense, in order to get married, these men would have to have more money. If they were trying to marry these women, it's obviously more than just economics. A lot of it is, social views as well. But a lot of the men then turn to mail order marriage as a way to increase their marriage prospects.
Wait, what about the issue of like today? There's no stigma against a male and a female cohabitating before marriage. But what about back then? You couldn't do that back then at Jamestown, could you?
Oh, well, that certainly. So you've hit a number of different things, and that is certainly one of them as well. Sex before marriage was a big problem,
right?
And plenty of people still obviously did it. But if you get pregnant, it's a woman has a very strong incentive. She has to get married now. Now there's birth control. Women can have sex before marriage and not get pregnant. So there's not the same push to get married for those reasons either. So women having more economic freedom and also sexual freedom, reproductive freedom is a big part of this as well.
I am totally so fascinated by this topic. The book is Buying a Bride, An Engaging History of Mail Order Matches. And I can't imagine anybody not, after hearing you now, not wanting to get this book. Now, a question I had, when I was watching C-SPAN, I had so many questions. I should have wrote them down. But let me ask you this. Now, back then, because you said the women had so much power. Now, how does that work? When they're getting off the boat, like they can pick and choose who they want right there on the dock? Or were they exchanging letters and pictures beforehand? How did all that work?
Well, it depends on which group of mail order brides we're talking about. With the early colonial mail order brides, they didn't have any contact with any of the men. So there were advertisements basically for women to become mail order brides. They all came over together on ships. They get off the ships, and in many instances, the men are waiting there all clean and, showing off. But very rarely did the women get married immediately. Most of the time, they took their time. Part of the deal was that they would not be forced into marriage, that they could take their time, that they could get to know the guys. In French Canada, it's very interesting. So the women, get off the boat. They're put in, special, housing where everything's paid for. They basically start dating, and there are all these marriage contracts that the women sign. And one of the things you find is that women will sign multiple marriage contracts. So maybe like a month into it, one of the women thinks that this guy seems good, but, well, actually 3 weeks later she's changed her mind. She now signs a new, so she's not getting married to them. These are like betrothal contracts. And the men are competing, showing that, hey, you should marry me and not him. I'm the better choice. And the government gives them the time and the space and the support to get to know these men so that they can make the best informed decision that they can. Out west, when we're talking about like the gold rush, there are some funny stories about the women getting off the boat and the guys literally showing them giant gold nuggets, just holding them up, Like, hey, I'm really rich here.
I can totally believe it. Now, what about, too, if these women are signing multiple contracts, there must have been cases of these men, like, murdering each other. This is like, this is a Wild West out there, or, new country. There must have been cases like that going on, like duels. How about duels? Duels over these women?
There are some rumors of duels. There's one particularly that a story about the Louisiana mail order brides, about how a duel was fought over the last one. But in general, men being very violent is not that attractive to women. So I'm not sure that would have been the biggest selling point for them. And, the thing is, the men don't have the power. It's not like, hey, if I kill this suitor, she's going to pick me. Right? It may actually have the exact opposite effect. So it's the woman with the power. He's got to impress her. And if he thinks being violent is going to impress her, then he might. But in most cases, that's not what the women are looking for. They're looking for a nice, stable guy. Things like having a winter-proofed house. That was a big turn-on, especially up in Canada. They liked that. Men who seemed to be able to provide, who also respected their decisions, didn't pressure them. What's interesting about the Canadian example is that the women had all the time in the world to get married, but the men did not. So under these laws that were passed, any man who had the opportunity to get married had to get married. And if he didn't, he lost his hunting privileges. So the government was very harsh on the men, but they weren't on the women. And you can see that's because the power dynamics had switched. They were not willing to put the pressure on the women. They wanted to give them, the time, the space to choose who they want to be with.
This is so fascinating. It reminds me, because I remember there was that movie with Jack Nicholson in the Old West about where, he was allowed to come out of prison and to marry some woman because there was a shortage of men, I guess, back in... It's totally upside down of how things really were, Well,
I'm not sure, but I don't know if I know the movie.
Yeah.
But you could certainly have places where there were shortages of men, particularly after the Civil War, right?
Okay.
So thousands and thousands of men die in the Civil War, and one of the push factors that does happen post-Civil War is that in the eastern cities, there are very few men, and you now have what is charmingly referred to as the surplus woman problem. You can imagine, as a woman, how you would take that term. So there are all these men talking about the surplus woman problem, which is that there are these extra women who can't get married and they can't work, and what are we going to do with them? This is a horrible thing. They're talking about this in England at the same time as well. And a lot of these women are the ones who do decide to go out west, where they're not considered surplus. They're actually begging for them to come out there. And they're saying, hey, we have lots of men who would be interested. We have lots of jobs. A lot of times the mail order brides were incentivized by good jobs. So these western towns are like, hey, we have a lot of guys who would be interested in marrying you, but you can come out here and you can get good wages. We want women as teachers, as cooks, as seamstresses, and we will pay you well and we will respect you for it. And one of the other ways you can see that the western states meant what they said about respecting women was that it was the western states that gave women many more legal rights first than the eastern states. So, for instance, in California at the time of the gold rush, where they're trying to incentivize women to come out there, when they're drafting their constitution, they decide to give women equal property rights so they can have a share of their own marital property during marriage, which is against the whole coverture idea. And part of the reason the men do this is you actually have this conversation during the Constitutional Convention where some of the men get up and say things like, well, being a bachelor with the hope that I might one day get married, I think we should really pass this law. And you see this in Wyoming, too, which is the first state to give women the right to vote. They don't do it because Wyoming is this bastion of liberalism. They do it because it's full of men, and the men want women, and they think correctly that if they pass laws that respect women, that women will come. And a lot of the women's rights advocates actually supported these states in doing it, promising them that this would be the best immigration incentive that they could come up with.
And this is so fascinating. Now, what about a woman goes all the way to either to Jamestown or out west, and they pay their way to get out there? But now what if the woman says, hey, you know what, I don't like this. Do they pay her way to go back?
Well, depending on what we're talking about, right? So if they come to Jamestown or Canada, French Canada in the 17th century, they don't pay for them to go back in any meaningful way, but they have the right to stay unmarried and be protected by the government. So they will be cared for in the colony as long as they want. They also have, job prospects, so they can earn money as well. There aren't that many cases, actually no cases I know of Jamestown or the Canadian women who go back. In Louisiana, they do go back. And part of the reason they go back is because in Louisiana, they're tricked. So I've been telling you about Canada and Jamestown, which incentivized the women. They protected the women. Louisiana doesn't do any of that. Louisiana, they lie to the women. They tell them that Louisiana is this land flowing with milk and honey, that they'll have a life of leisure. They won't have to, so they won't have to work at all. They won't have to worry about anything. So these French women get super excited. There's almost like a lottery to become a mill or bride for Louisiana. And they step off the boat, and Louisiana's in the middle of a famine. And the women immediately try to step right back onto the boat. They're actually barred, and they realize they're prisoners. But as soon as they can, eventually, many of them do go back. Word gets back to France. The French government can't get any more willing volunteers, so they start using women from the prisons and forcing them over. And as a result, their mill or bride system is a disaster, because one of the things that makes mill or marriage work, the main thing, is that the women come willingly, that these are not kidnapped women. And when the Louisiana bridal program changes from voluntary to involuntary, it doesn't work at all. So the women, either they leave as soon as they can. Many of them also are sick, because a lot of them are, prostitutes, and they're dying of syphilis. So either they die immediately or they start infecting the colony with syphilis. So that's not really good if you're trying to increase your population through, childbirth. And a bunch of the others who are criminals just decide to stay criminals. And there are all these conversations by the French government, or the Louisiana French officials, saying that this is a disaster. We've just made this colony super unsafe, and we need to get rid of these women.
Yeah, the last place you want to be is with a bunch of unhappy women. I think anybody would agree with that. That's still the worst. Okay, this would be a good time to take a commercial break. Okay, we're with Marcia A. Zugg, Z-U-G, and you can go on Amazon and find this book, Buying a Bride, An Engaging History of Mail Order Matches. And I was just thinking, too, this is going to be up on YouTube and a couple of archives before Friday. So you have an appearance coming up on Thursday, coming up?
On Thursday, at the Virginia Historical Society.
And another one coming up in Naples, Florida, that we'll be adding to the description of the show. So we'll be right back with more of Marcia A. Zugg, Buying a Bride, An Engaging History of Mail Order Matches. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much. And now a word from our sponsors. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, Anxiety or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119. PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. They're going to send a little extra soap, travel size, soap bars and laundry soap, cleaning soap flakes. I've been using that stuff all day long today. Great stuff. Order today at puresoapflakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today talking to Marcia Zugg, and the book is Buying a Bride, An Engaging History of Mail Order Matches. And I caught Marcia on C-SPAN the other night, and I got to tell you, I'm the luckiest man in the world. I get to talk to the most interesting people in the world about the most fascinating topics, and this is really one of them. I never even knew this kind of thing, like these little nuances in mail order bride history even existed. And also, too, you got to look at this Amazon, because this book got positive reviews. Every review is a gold star. So, Marcia, thank you so much. So now we left off, we were talking about Louisiana, where they told these women, hey, there's air conditioning down here, it's going to be beautiful. You know what I mean? And they get off, and it's not quite that way. In history, what is the next phase of this phenomenon of mail order brides?
So first you have the colonial period, and then Americans are moving west slowly, so they move with their families, so you really don't see mail order marriage for a while. And then it's the gold rush period again. So gold's discovered, all of these men rush out west, and then you have this gender disparity again. You have all of these men and very few women. And part of the concern also is that the men out west are getting kind of violent and rowdy, and people are worried about this. And one of the solutions that the government hits on is that we really need to get women. That women are going to calm these men down, and we need to bring them out here. And there are a bunch of these mail order bride expeditions that happen out west. You have it in California, you have it in Washington, or the Washington Territory, and then also further north in British Columbia. And in all of these places, you have men large groups of men who come out to make their fortunes, and they don't have very many women. There are Native women in California, they tended not to intermarry, but they were extremely violent toward the Native populations, which was unfortunately not really seen as a major problem, but is one of the benefits that happens when the white women come out west. They at least, stop raping the Native women to some extent. And then in Washington State and British Columbia, there's actually a concern that comes up about boundary lines. So one of the issues that I found very interesting was that there's this concern that Americans are going to, once there's gold found in British Columbia, that the American miners are going to come over the border and basically just claim British Columbia as theirs. And if British Columbia doesn't have enough people, that there's not going to be much that they can do to stop it. So one of the reasons that they decide they need mail-order brides is to keep the miners who come up to mine the gold strike in British Columbia, to keep them there and to settle there and feel like this is a good place to be, but that they want to be British and aren't trying to take it over for America. And so the mail-order brides are a big part of this, increasing the population of Canada to sort of stave off the potential American invasion.
And I guess they're given citizenship right away.
Oh, yeah. And they give them land. But in order to get that land, they have to take the citizenship.
Fascinating. Okay, and then what is the next phase of this?
Okay, this is where things change.
Yeah.
So up until this point, we've been talking about European women, so women from England and France, or American women, white American women from the East Coast. Then, during this period, in the second half of the 19th century, we start seeing non-white mail-order brides. And this has to do with changing immigration law. So there are a lot of Chinese workers, a lot of Chinese immigrants come over after 1849 to work on the railroads, to help with the gold rush. And they're encouraged for a while. Then there's a recession, and the white Californians don't want any more Chinese immigration, so they start passing they convince the government to pass these Chinese exclusion acts. So Chinese immigration is banned. Japan sees what's going on. Japan doesn't want the insult of actually being barred from sending people to this country, so they work out an arrangement where they will, on their own, prevent their people from immigrating to the United States. So there doesn't actually have to be a ban. But in what is called the gentleman's agreement, there is a loophole or a clause saying that Japanese men who are already over in America have the right to bring over their wives. So now we get Japanese picture brides. These are mail-order brides. They're called picture brides in this context. And before the immigration laws, you didn't have them. Japanese women who wanted to come over to the United States, they came over just the way the men did. They came over as immigrants and laborers and, to seek their fortune. Now, nobody can come over unless they're a wife. So there's a strong incentive for women to consider mail-order marriage. The men also have a very strong incentive to seek mail-order brides because there are very few Japanese women in the United States. The United States has very strong anti-miscegenation laws, which means that Japanese men cannot marry non-Asian women. The only way for these women to come over then is to marry these men, and they have to do it through mail-order marriage, basically, because if the Japanese men leave the United States and go back to Japan, well, technically they should be allowed to re-enter with their wives. It's very, very iffy whether they'll be able to. So the men realize that their best chance for finding a wife is through the picture bride system. This is where they send their pictures in a letter, back often to their hometowns or various different places in Japan. They advertise for a wife. She sends her picture. She writes to him. And then if they decide that this seems like a good match, he sends for her. Actually, what happens is they marry by proxy over in Japan, which is where someone will stand in for the groom. They'll get married in Japan, so now they're married. That type of proxy marriage was legal in Japan. So now they're married, now she's a wife, and now she can get on the boat to come over to the United States, and in most cases, the immigration authorities at Angel Island let these women in if they can, prove that if their husband steps forward and says, yes, this is my wife, and you get thousands of Japanese picture brides coming over this way.
And just think that's the first time they've ever spoken, because there was no telephones back in those days. They could write letters back and forth, but that's the first time they ever spoke to each other.
Oh, yes, and to add a wrinkle to this story, in many cases the men lied.
Oh, no.
So they would send pictures of themselves, but pictures of themselves from like 15 years ago. So the women, who were usually very young, between like 15 and 25, they're seeing pictures of, maybe like a 35-year-old guy, and they get here and he's like 50, 55. He writes these letters about how he owns like a great business and is doing so well. Turns out it's not true at all. The problem for them is that if they don't marry this man, they can't get into the country. So unlike some of the previous brides we've been talking about, who didn't have to marry any particular man, and there certainly wasn't any rush, for the Japanese picture brides there is. If they don't marry this man, then they have to go back to Japan. That's very shameful for their families. So in most cases, even when they've been lied to, the women do go through with these marriages. But it does create a problem that wasn't there in the previous Miller marriages. And this is something that is very dependent on the laws and the sort of protections for Miller marriage. So it's not that Miller marriage is all good or all bad, but you can make it safer or riskier based on the laws in place at the time. So with the Japanese picture brides, because they don't have many options except to marry this particular man, it does increase the risk of these marriages for them.
The first Catfish.
Like the first Catfish?
Yeah, Catfish, the TV show Catfish, where people lie about who they are on the internet and they send fake pictures and fake reputation. Oh. If they could have sold it to MTV back then. Now, by the way, back then, who financed this? Was it financed individually? Because it wasn't the government back then, or big...
right.
Or
so the men would pay for the women to come over.
Were there agencies, or they just did it on their own? Word got around?
Sometimes they would know someone in a village and ask that woman to spread the word.
Okay.
So kind of a matchmaker, but not really, more of a point of contact. Right? So they send it to some woman, like an older woman in the village, and say what they're looking for, and then she sets out, starts talking to people who would be interested. Here's, this nice guy who's written to me. And then, she puts the two in correspondence contact.
Now, was this just Japanese men, or were Caucasian American men allowed to import these Japanese women?
Well, they absolutely were not allowed to.
Okay.
So that's part of the anti-miscegenation laws. White men couldn't marry Japanese women either.
Okay.
And actually what starts to happen is that the white men are getting very upset by this, because the whole purpose of these laws was supposed to be that they're stopping Chinese and Japanese immigration. And there's this loophole. I mean, it's always there, but that they feel is being exploited. So all these thousands of women are coming over. And the thought had been, okay, so we have some Japanese people here, but if there are no women or only a few women, they won't be able to really multiply, right? But now all these wives are coming over, and there's all this discussion about the fertility of Japanese women, how they're, all of them are popping out a baby or two a year, and the Japanese population is just ballooning. And one of the major concerns is that although they can prevent Japanese immigrants from naturalizing and therefore not being able to vote, they can't prevent the children born in America of these Japanese couples from being American citizens. And now there's the possibility of Japanese communities with political power. And this is making people absolutely crazy out west. So that's like the first time you start seeing real pushback against Miller brides and a real demonization of this practice.
That's fascinating, because that probably did happen, right? Because when they have those little ethnic towns like Chinatown and, these little ethnic towns, they do gain a lot of political power quickly. because they can vote as a block and they can operate as a block.
Well, maybe, but we've got to wait a while for these kids to grow up to vote.
Yeah, that's true too. So then what happens next after this Japanese issue?
Okay, well, they eventually banned the Japanese picture brides, but at the same time, this is when we're starting to get our first real slew of immigration restrictions, and the Asian restrictions are the ones that are complete bans, but you start getting all of these restrictions intending to keep out poor Eastern European immigrants. And before you had the various different quota systems, and the quota laws say things like you can only have as many people from a particular country as were present in the United States during a particular year. So there's one based on the 1890 census. Well, in 1890, there were very few Italians. So this means that you can only have, a few Italians coming over, things like that. But one of the loopholes that we still have is that you can, I don't even want to use the loophole because that sounds negative. One of the ways of getting around these unfair restrictions is marriage, a marriage to an American citizen. So you can jump to the front of the immigration line if you're marrying an American citizen. So before you had these restrictions, Eastern European immigrants who wanted to come over, they would just come over. But now they have to get around all of these restrictions that are intended to keep them out. And one of the most affected groups are single women. So single women from Eastern Europe have almost no chance of getting into the United States unless they get married to an American citizen. So all of a sudden, for the same reason you got Japanese picture brides, you start getting Eastern European marital brides. So they're coming over, Eastern Europe, including Italy in that, lots of Jewish women coming over from Russia and various places as well. And it's also creating the same kind of intense backlash because the laws are intended to keep these women out, these groups out in general, and instead these groups are finding ways to still come in.
Now, those misogyny laws, were they allowed to marry these Eastern European women and the Italian women and stuff like that, or no?
Anti-miscegenation laws. These are usually men from the same ethnic backgrounds, but they're all basically considered white if you're European under these laws. So there's not that much intermarriage. It's not like you're getting, a French guy writing to Italy for an Italian woman. So it's, an Italian-American man who's seeking an Italian marital bride.
Gotcha. Okay. And when did it start that the people, because the stereotype is like, these Asian mail order brides or the Filipino mail order brides. When did that come about?
Well, you don't see that much of this during the 1950s and 60s. And that's really, there's almost no Miller marriage at that point. And part of that is, people often refer to it as the golden age of marriage, right? The Leave It to Beaver period. Everybody gets married. Everyone gets married young. It's what you do. So there's no real need for it. There's no one who's not able to get married who wants to. But, starting in the 1970s with, the rise of, women's liberation and the ability for women to work and make their own money and not need marriage anymore, you start getting women who would have gotten married in the 50s, deciding not to marry. And they're deciding not to marry men that they consider bad bets, right? So the women are willing to get married, but only if they think it's a good deal for themselves. So all of these men who used to be able to get married are not able to get married anymore. And one of the things about America is, and it certainly doesn't have to be this way, but marriage is kind of how you show you've made it, right? Not that everyone has to get married, but it's one thing to choose not to get married. It's something very different to not be able to find someone who thinks you're worthy of being married to. And, the whole American dream with the little house and the white picket fence and all that, it's even more unattainable on, one person's salary, and you're getting rejected by, the women who you may think should be the wives in this fantasy. And as that's happening more and more, a lot of these men start turning to mail-order marriage because although they may be getting rejected by the American women, because of their American citizenship, they are still fairly attractive marriage candidates to foreign women.
Incredibly fascinating topic. We're out of time, but Marcia Zugg, the book is Buying a Bride, An Engaging History of Mail-Order Matches. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much.
And now a word from our sponsors. OppermanReport.com. Hey, do you like what you're hearing? Do you like the work that you see us doing here at Opperman Report? You can support that work by becoming a member at OppermanReport.com. And as you have access to over 200 exclusive shows and interviews that you can't find on YouTube or Spreaker or iHeart or iTunes or KYAH. You can't find them anywhere else online, exclusive to our member sections, to our members. Also, too, there's images, videos, documents, court docs. And don't forget, you can hear your ad played here on the Opperman Report, reach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people on a daily basis because the show is repeated every day all over the world. Contact me at oppermanreport@gmail.com and I'll give you a good deal on advertising rates.
Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. PureSoapFlakes.com. 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. They're going to send a little extra soap, travel size, soap bars and laundry soap, cleaning soap flakes. I've been using that stuff all day long today. Great stuff. Order today at puresoapflakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.